There we go. Interesting. Thank you, Sarah, for the reminder. It's like the mute button for me. Wow, some interesting words. Again, if you get a chance, just have a scroll at each other's. Jonathan, let's hear from you. Interesting, excitement, opportunity. Tell us more. You're running towards it. I can feel it.
What's that?
You're running towards the change.
Yeah, I mean, I always find change interesting about what it's going to be and what impacts it's going to have. Trying to take some type of appreciative inquiry into what it will be, the work that it'll take, and how it will go. And I think that anytime that there's the possibility of change, it can lead to really positive opportunity.
Yeah, and there's quite a few that really concur with that, where we've got people talking about possibility. Stephen, let's just hear from you, because you've got an interesting set of 3 words. You've got past, present, future.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I just think as we go through change, Web likes a bit of change, right? And when we go through change, it shouldn't be change for change's sake. And that there's a lot of where we've come from that really informs the future of where we go. And then trying to capture where people are, or where the state of the organization is, and then setting that vision for the future and working on what's the most respectful but also kind of visionary or exciting next step. So that's why I think past, present, future.
Yeah, it's that
they should be
again,
connected.
It's the connection, and again, it comes back to that idea of process, doesn't it? Rob, you've kind of put a word in there. I think that kind of a few people have included the word scary. Go on, just talk to us about that, because I think change for some people can be really scary as well.
Yeah, I think it's both scary and exciting at the same time, because you're doing something new, which is exciting, but not knowing if it's going to work out, what's going to happen, that's kind of scary. So it's for me, it's both at the same time. It's scary and exciting.
Yeah, it's like the roller coaster effect, isn't it? When you're right at the top, do you hold on really tight and close your eyes, or do you throw your hands in the air and smile for the camera on the way down? And I think it's always that balance of which way to go with it. I've also got WOB leaders. I've got Marina, Karen, Tracy, Regina, Monica, Zach, Jess, and everybody in there. You've got the word hard in there. Go on, and constant. Go on, tell us about that.
Hopefully the camera will work. We talked about how change is a constant. It's always happening. But the reality is that intentional change with a focused objective or impact or desired impact isn't always easy, right? It requires a lot of discipline. It requires to be able to put aside fear, acknowledge it, but put aside fear of all of the uncertainty that comes with the process. It's not just, oh, happy-go-lucky, go with the flow. To really focus on an objective, it's hard work.
It's really hard work, isn't it? And I think that process of, kind of rolling with it and not just initiating a change, but sustaining a change. I think that can be really challenging, and not having too much change so that what you don't initiate is change fatigue, and all of that takes kind of some working through as a middle leader, and I think as senior leaders as well. And that's where we've got to really kind of seek to close the gap in different layers of leadership so that we don't end up with that. Okay, some really interesting kind of sharing there. And Lorraine, I'm just looking at yours. You've put necessary ? Go on, tell us about that just before we move on, because that really interests me.
It's not much different to what Stephen mentioned as well, it's more to do with, first and foremost, when we're talking about change, to double check that it's not just change for change's sake, like just to make sure that it's not reinventing the wheel, but then of course, once that's been analyzed and evaluated, if the change is real and not just an illusion, then it can be, nerve-wracking and exciting and motivating. Yeah. But I do think that sometimes when we talk about it, we do need to first make sure that it is, especially when it's something that's going to maybe throw out something that's already been happening, and then we're going a completely different direction, to make sure that it's really worth leaving what we're on, the path we're on, to ensure that where we're going forward is the right direction.
Absolutely. And I think that notion of just being brave enough to ask that question of, is this necessary and is it the right time? You need somebody on your team who will always ask those challenging questions, because otherwise everybody just plows on and on. And actually, sometimes it's good just to have somebody who says, let's just stop for a minute. Sometimes they're portrayed as the negative voice in a team. I think they're a really valuable voice in a team, because they're the people who stop you making silly decisions sometimes, just by asking the provocative question. So what we're kind of establishing is, this idea of change as a process, but also this idea that change provokes an emotional response in people. And, for me, I think when we kind of look at those words, some of the words are really positive. Some of those words aren't quite so positive. And I think that reflects how often people feel about change. And what we don't want in a school is people, languishing in what we often call the comfort zone. But nor do we want people in the panic zone with change. It's about getting them into that, what I would call the challenge zone, the zone where you can really stretch your legs, but it feels good and you feel confident. And, if we kind of think about change as a process, one of the things that, again, I would think about is, how would you draw change? And this is a really interesting exercise to do with your teams, to see how people feel about it. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me for just a couple of minutes. I'm not going to be judging anybody's drawing skills. I'm an English teacher, so I can write you a beautiful paragraph in lovely handwriting, but my drawing skills leave a lot to be desired. At the weekend, I saw a little member of my family, she's 3, who asked me to draw a horse. It was embarrassing. So there's no judgment on the drawing, but just take a minute to doodle on the piece of paper in front of you. How would you draw change? And I'm hoping someone might be brave. And we'll do a little bit of sharing. Okay, I'll just give you another 30 seconds. Okay, Kim, I'm hoping you're going to start me off, because you were with me and we talked quite a lot about this last week. on one of our Middle Leader courses. And I suppose what I'm interested in with you is, like, has anything shifted? So go on, share with the group how you would draw change.
It's always influenced by what I've been doing in school by my children. We've got the hungry caterpillar.
Come on and tell us about why you drew that.
Because I think it really demonstrates, doesn't it, what successful change really needs. It needs fueling. It needs energy to begin with, but it's got to be the right kind of energy. It can't be, I'm presuming everybody knows the hungry caterpillar as I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
So it can't be, all the junk food. It can't be the negative input. It can't be the negative attitudes that start off those changes. It's got to be a quality start to those changes. And then the ideas can grow and the momentum can grow. And that's when it becomes possible to create something beautiful at the end. But also there's the part where obviously for a caterpillar, they're in that cocoon. And sometimes there is those areas of like stagnant periods where you're waiting for something really significant to show up and you think, oh, we've been doing this for 2 weeks and I can't see an impact. But actually sometimes we have to be patient and wait to see those quality results. And if we're patient, if we give things time and we trust in our judgments, that change can produce something amazing.
Wow. I think if we can unmute for just 10 seconds, let's give Kim a bit of a clap there. Team round of applause. That's a great,
Brilliant.
a great explanation. And I think one of the things that really strikes me is we often talk about the change with people, but we don't actually go through that process that you've just gone through there with a team, talking about what that process might look and feel like. And I think doing that kind of drawing exercise with your team and getting people to talk about how they're feeling and what they're thinking means that actually what you're doing through that process is just taking the temperature and asking people to draw at different points will just give you an indicator about whether some of that thinking is possibly shifting or changing. And it's a really useful low-key way of doing it without having to eyeball anybody around a table and ask them how they're feeling, because at that point people kind of tend to do that sometimes in a chair. It's a way of kind of bringing some of those feelings out. Let's have a look. Jean, what did you draw? Go on, share with us what you drew. Go on, talk us through it.
All right, so I've got a ladder up against a brick wall and a light bulb up the top. So the wall kind of symbolizes sometimes the things that get in our way and the things that block us from moving forward. The ladder is what we construct to try and get over that wall or to climb those obstacles. And the light bulb at the top is, I guess, the light at the end of the tunnel, or the possibility of bringing light, I guess, to a new issue or a new direction. So,
wow, I love that, and I love the idea that you have to kind of climb, and that there will be things that get in your way, but that's okay because you can climb and surmount those, and actually keeping that focus on the light at the end of the tunnel, that no matter how challenging you'll get there, it's just a matter of process and time. So I'm going to pop you into a breakout now, and you might want to share some of your drawings with each other in the breakout. But the thing that I want you to just concentrate on alongside that, because that idea of drawing starts to bring out those ideas about, what are the key components of a successful change? So just think about your drawing. Think about a successful change that you've either led or that you've been part of, and think about what made it successful. And I'll pop you into some breakouts. I'll share the slide into the breakout so you can see it to focus the discussion. And I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes. So let's just pop you in. Okay, here we go. You should get an invite anytime now.
That everyone is on
Sorry.
that everyone is on the same page. Of course, that would be sort of the ideal, and there's always going to be some that are outliers with the buy-in process. But that's what we, you know, would certainly aspire to, is having a common goal and wanting to work together towards that versus against it.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of the dream, isn't it? And I think that's where having lots of those conversations and really setting the vision out clearly can help with that, and talking about the process. Let's see what another group said. Let's see if they agree, disagree, whether there's anything similar. Boyd, let's hear from you. I don't know if you're able to unmute and do a share from your group.
Absolutely, and I apologize if there's some student voices in the background. I have some students doing service learning, but we were able to share some designs. Rob had an interesting design because it was a straight line that had a bunch of different colored lines coming in and spiraling around it to show that direction and vision that's in change, but all of the flexibility that has to happen as you change course and as people spiral around a common vision. Kevin had a great runway metaphor for getting the plane to take off and making sure that there's enough runway to get takeoff and to land. And Renee also had a good idea for visualizing the storming and the norming process and going through that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I think making sure you have enough fuel to take off and then to get back down again is absolutely key. And I suppose that's the sustainability piece on the change, isn't it, in lots of respects.
And I just like that it invites the building the airplane in the air metaphor as well, if you bring the tools.
Yeah, yeah, flying the plane while you're building it. Okay, and Liz Wilson, let's hear from you. What did your group talk about? Don't know if we can pick up. Let's just try someone else from Liz's group. M. Armstrong. I don't know if you're able to share from.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. Yeah, we were along the same track of getting the community to, you know, sort of buy into it, if you like, and move together, and, you know, being a group and not an individual. So that's the crux of what most of our group were talking about. But we also got to see a wonderful view. Us stuck in Beijing, we got to see the view of Hong Kong and the beach. And I think all of us stuck in Beijing would love the change of being on the ocean right now, but that's a different sort of change, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Although I could show you the North Sea in the UK, and if you had one dip in that, you would never want to go in again because it's so cold. It's a brutal experience if you ever have to go swimming in the North Sea. It's great to kind of hear just different perspectives and that sharing. And to a certain extent, that leads us nicely into the next slide. Some of you will have seen this, I'm sure, before. It's a table from Nosterthausen and Villa, and it's called Dimensions of Change. And what they explored was, what are the key components of change, but also kind of with the caveat that we need to understand that change provokes an emotional response. So if you just take a look at the table, what you can see is that they identify 5 key aspects of change along the top. Like, you've got to have vision, you've got to have skills, you need to provide incentives, you also need to make sure you've got the right resources, and there needs to be an action plan about how the change will be implemented over time, with some clear timelines and milestones. And what they say is that if any of those pieces are missing, then it provokes an emotional reaction in others. So if you work down the table and you look at the second line, if there's no vision, then it leads to, if you go to the last column, confusion. So that's that idea of, you know, action without vision is a nightmare. It leaves people feeling really confused. I think if you've got everything apart from skills, if you work to the next line down, then it leads to anxiety. And you could see that when we went into the first lockdown. So people, and I'm going to put myself in this group, who didn't have really good technical skills were really worried about going online with learning. I remember the first time I was ever asked to do a Zoom training, and I said yes with absolute confidence on the outside, but inside there was an absolute swell of panic and anxiety in me about doing something new. Again, if you work down another line, if we don't have any incentives, change can be really slow. They don't have to be big incentives like lots of cake and coffee, but I do think they help. It's sometimes just that quiet word with somebody where you just say, good job with that, well done. Again, if you work along and you don't have the resources, people can get very frustrated with the change. I think, again, remote learning was a good example of that, where you maybe had children who didn't have access to devices or who had poor internet. And then last but not least, without an action plan, you can end up with a false start. And, you know, when we think about that, often people set off with a change with lots of enthusiasm, but if that longer term plan isn't in place, if we go back to Kevin's analogy of the aeroplane, then you're going to be struggling mid-air and you might have to bring the plane down before you even reach your destination or have some kind of a crisis. Kevin, I'm going to invite you in there. What are you thinking when you look at that table? What's interesting for you?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this table, and I think one of the things that can, when people look at this, sometimes it can feel a little linear, right? So it feels like you have to start with the vision and build the skills and then create the incentives. And I would just like to throw in there, sometimes incentives can be replaced with the word motivation, because a lot of change you're not going to incentivize in the traditional sense. You're just going to try to motivate people to do. But often this is, as Rob Langland's drawing showed, often it's very cyclical and back and forth, and you have to gain skills before you can develop a vision and things like that. Right.
Yeah, change is messy, isn't it? And I think accepting that change is messy can be really helpful. That often we'll go up and down and backwards and forwards. And I think kind of looking at this and thinking, okay, where might some of that messiness come in? What is it with the team that I've got and the change that I want to lead that I need to really focus on or think about here is key. So this kind of links to another idea. And again, many of you will be familiar with this, but I'm really interested in for me the idea of people and processes, and that change can provoke that emotional response, because you know, when you manage a change, you've got to manage the process, but you've got to manage those people within it, and then you've got to try and manage yourself, which is sometimes even more challenging. And this is the Kubler-Ross curve. And lots of you will have seen this. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a Swiss-American psychiatrist, and she developed this curve when she was thinking about the 5 stages of grief. And what she kind of talked about was the idea of, you know, when people are suffering from grief, they'll often go into denial. Then they'll get really angry. Then they'll start to bargain. Then you'll see some depression and acceptance. And then you'll see people over time beginning to move on. And this has often been attributed now to being similar to the change process, because when something changes, then you lose something. So if you introduce a new curriculum, you lose your old curriculum. If you introduce a new policy, then you lose an old policy that you were comfortable and familiar with. And you can see that the stages work, I suppose, through this. So, you know, kind of, this is usually aimed at SLT, or you as a middle leader. You introduce a new policy and everybody says, no, she'll never do it. She'll never do it. And then we go into anger. How dare she do this to us? So you can start to see those reactions come through. And then you see the bargaining. So, well, I'll only do this if they give me this, or, you know, I'll only do this if they agree to that. And then you sink into the depression, which is, oh my goodness, this is a real mess. It's a mess. This is awful. And then you kind of start to come out of the depression, and you see people saying kind of, well, actually, it's not that bad. So you've got the acceptance. And then the bit that I think is really rewarding is when you get into the moving on and people say, well, I actually think this is better than the way that we did it before. And I think one of the reasons kind of I wanted to show you this today was because it helps you to understand that as a leader, when you're in the firing line with those first 3 stages, it's normal. And you've just got to kind of try and work it through and ride it out. But I think as a leader, there are things that you can do to help. So if you look along the bottom rung of that diagram, I think if you give your team really good information about why you're doing the change, what it's going to look like in the process, that can really help them with that denial and anger phase. Again, if you really support people, it can really help with the bargaining and the depression phase. I think as a leader, you've always got to be an optimist and create that positive direction. And again, that helps people to move into the acceptance. And the idea of getting them involved and sharing the change can really help people to move on. So again, just a minute to kind of process that a little bit. And let's just take a little bit of feedback or some thoughts on it. Karen, what are you thinking when you look at that? Let's see if we can get you to unmute.
Yeah, I think it's true. I have seen this one before too, and it's a really good reminder to kind of go back to the fact that it's not, you know, 2 stages. There's actually quite a process that people move through when they are adjusting to any kind of change. And there's lots of changes at the moment. So I think, you know, keeping in mind that there are multiple changes happening, you know, often simultaneously. And so people are in various stages of moving towards accepting a variety of different things that might be happening. I think it takes me back to what you said earlier, that change is inevitably messy. Like, yeah, supporting people through it is really important, and planning for it is really important. But even the best plans are still going to be somewhat messy, because change is about people who are involved in that change, and everybody reacts differently and works through it at their own pace. So I guess what I
Yeah,
was thinking.
absolutely. So I'm going to show you one more slide, and then I'm going to let you go and process this a little bit in a breakout. But you know, this is a great book if you've not read it. It's called Leading in a Culture of Change, and it's by Michael Fullen. And there are two versions of it, and he updated it in 2020. And he kind of includes some key messages about leading change that are on the screen there. And again, as you kind of go into the breakout, I'm just going to ask you, just jot down the bullet point that really resonates with you there, which is the one that you're drawn to, because it will give you just a focus for your discussion in the breakout. Just give you a minute to jot it down. So which one are you connecting with? Okay. Okay, and I'm going to pop you now into the cafe, and we're going to, again, just take that last 5 minutes in there. But just be thinking about a change that you want to lead or a change that you're currently leading. Based on today's session, what is it that you need to consider in your context or pay attention to in your context? And if you've got any great top tips for leading change, again, just share them in your breakout. So I'm just going to give you the last 5 minutes together. Here we go. I'll share this screen into the breakout. Just a bit of processing time. Got about 20 seconds. I'm hoping you had a good discussion. Yeah, great. There's never enough time for them. We could probably do with a 2-hour one and just like let you all go into a breakout for an hour and just talk to each other. Okay, just about got everybody back. Okay, my apologies to you all, that time is always short in those breakouts. I was just saying to the first group back, we should probably give you a full hour just in the breakouts to talk to each other and almost open the space with a theme and just see where it goes. I'd be really interested to do that. As we just bring today's session to a close, the question that I always ask is what are you going to take away from today? The ECIS gift shop is a beautiful place. It's full of cuddly toys, pens, pencils. There is something, hopefully, for everyone. If you can just share in the chat something that maybe has resonated with you, that you're thinking about, that maybe you're going to take away from the session, that's really helpful for us. It's such a big topic. It's hard to do it justice really in an hour, but hopefully we've opened up some thinking. Yeah, Amy, great articles from you. Thank you. If you want two books to read are Leading in a Culture of Change by Michael Fullen and John Cotter's Leading Change. Again, that's a great book and really easy to read. He writes it in the style of a fable. So for those of you who love a story, it's a great place to start. I think a big thank you from me today. I'm going to stop the share so we can actually see each other. For coming along and giving up your time. I know things are really, really busy at the moment for everybody, but it's great to get over 30 people online today. So thank you for joining with me. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for joining kind of with each other as well. And I know the context in lots of places is pretty tricky at the moment with the pandemic. So I'm just kind of saying, let's all stay safe and make sure that you take care of yourselves, physically and emotionally. I think it's a tough time for everybody. I'm going to ask really kindly for those of you who've got a camera on, can we take a quick picture and we'll get it posted up? So we need to get our best smiles that you can see from outer space on there. And I'm going to make an attempt. We've got a good screen today. Give me a smile or a wave if you're on there, a big thumbs up. Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Oh, hang on. Have I done that right? Let's try again. Keep going. My technical ability knows no bounds. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you all. Take care. Keep the conversation going on Twitter if you want to join us. I'll see you soon. Thank you.